7 years ago, in 2013, I set out with a group of friends to cycle from Portland, Oregon to Portland Place in London. Today, in lockdown, I think about that ride and I yearn for the great spaces that we cycled through. They flash upon the inward eye, as Wordsworth would say. Those great spaces in Wyoming, in Montana, and even South Dakota. And so I got out the clips of my films that I took at the time, and I put it together into a movie to remind me of those great open spaces and that magnificent country. Here's a map I put together to try and get my head around the scale of the task. We started off from Portland in April the 28th. We started then so that we could avoid the snow in the Rockies, but also get to New York before it got too hot. So we carried on through the Rockies, through Hood River, Umatilla, Walla Walla, Lewiston, Lola Hot Springs, Missoula, Darby, Jackson, Grable, Tensleep, Buffalo, and then through to Minneapolis towards the end of May, across to the Great Lakes, and then down to Chicago, down further across to Columbus, to Pittsburgh, to Philadelphia, and then arriving in New York on June the 30th. We then flew to Shannon and went across Ireland, Wales, and into England, finishing up in Portland Place in London. And this is a bicycle I had handmade for myself in Portland, so it was ready when I got there.
So we're really proud to have these guys here and excited to serve them some coffee tomorrow morning and point them east. Really excited about what they're up to.
Top to toe. And so Portland was out of the gate first. You know, in the 1990s, when I was the bike coordinator and Earl Blumenauer was city commissioner, there was a tremendous investment made. The city invested in some of the encouragement activities, and again, not big dollars, but safe routes to school. So they really started getting every school to see cycling as just part of the way kids get to school. And I led that for the city. The cultural aspects all started clicking. In part, Jonathan Moss came in and he has this great blog. And then there were businesses that came here, and we had a study that I wrote about the economy related to bicycle businesses. And that study went nuclear, and it was to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, and all these businesses started locating here, or entrepreneurs started thinking of Portland as the mecca of bicycle manufacturing. Because once you start investing in bicycling and walking, it's just good.
A lot of We have a lot of bike-based businesses here. We're standing out in front of Rafa Apparel, which has our North American headquarters here. It seems like this time of year there's almost something going on bike-related almost every night of the week. I think we have probably the most developed bike culture in the world, I think, in terms of top to bottom, from like all those things I mentioned before. We definitely don't have the best bike network in the world. People in Northern European cities cycle at rates much higher than we do. But in terms of art and people and business and all the different pieces of bicycling here, I really think it's a real leading city in that respect.
I really like the detail that we see as we go past. The old buildings that are just crumbling into the ground. And today we stayed by the river for hours, people swimming, and that relaxed atmosphere is just what I hoped we'd get out of this, rather than relentless driving forwards.
I think the overwhelming thing that I've noticed so far is just you've got the advantage of the wider streets everywhere. You've got space in everything that you do.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it first really came true in Portland, where you had these bike boulevards, that they call them there, where it's kind of greenways in residential areas, where they've set aside it's residential streets where you can cycle down them, and they've got little motifs and things which are just beautiful.
Hi, I'm Colleen Stone. This is Ovando, Montana, and you're at the Stray Bullet. They're predicting over, I think, probably 750 to 1,000 cyclists this summer. There's 3 different specific races coming, rides, 1 race and 2 rides coming through, and other than that, there's just a lot of independent cyclists coming through on the Great Divide Ride, especially.
Our route today was pretty exciting and quite a tough one. We climb from 4,400 feet up to 9,666 over Powder River Pass. But it was tough. It was 2.5 hours of uphill, and I know a few people in the team were really nervous about the ascent and even worried they wouldn't make it, but everyone made it through, so we had a really good day.
Well, that was simply one of the most exhilarating experiences of my life. Just the whole sheer effort, but the beauty surrounding me was just amazing.
This has actually been the first week that we've really moulded together as a group. I think partly that's been the wind, the headwind that we've had to deal with. It's been, I think the first day this week we had 30-mile-an-hour headwind, and it's really meant that we've had to work and struggle together in our groups.
In Minneapolis, we've had a lot of political support for a lot of the bicycling changes that have been made over the past few years. We've been very fortunate to have a very supportive mayor. Mayor Rybeck has been a huge champion for bicycling in Minneapolis, and it's definitely helped our work a lot. Very supportive of a lot of the infrastructure and programming changes that have been made. We also have 13 council members in Minneapolis that are all very supportive of bicycling. They understand that the public wants better bicycling infrastructure and livable streets, so that's definitely translated to a lot of support for political support for biking in Minneapolis.
Going into the future, beyond the national pilot program, we're going to take what we've learned from that pilot program and continue to build out our network so each leg of the network is even more robust, and then also connect it to a larger region and a regional trail system that will serve suburban communities, connect to St. Paul, involve universities, students, and make our whole region really a bike and pedestrian friendly region.
I would love to change everything in a day, but it's not realistic. And I think under this mayor, we're directionally changing things significantly. So I think we're doing everything right. I guess I would love if there was more of an equality between the funding for, roads and cars and bridges and bikes. But like the mayor read an article over the weekend about something that was happening in New York, and he sent it to me and said, can we do this? What are we doing around this? So it's the electeds competing that I think is really healthy. And the mayor openly talks about it. He's like, I'm competing with Seattle and Portland to get these tech companies.
We worked for the better part of 10 years to make sure that every bus had a bike rack on the front. That and then when we announced with the Port Authority that the fleet was now complete, they surprised us by lifting the ban on bikes during peak hours of commuting on their train cars. So all within, in one fell swoop, we had 100% access to public transit, and I think that that's been huge. Every single day I see dozens of buses with bikes on the front of them. So people are saying now, I'm willing to ride down the hill to work, but I'll put my bike on the bus on the way home or get on.
So where do we want to go from here? We want to take what we've done and multiply it by a factor of 10. We want to connect every community, all 90 neighborhoods of Pittsburgh and the surrounding municipalities with bike infrastructure. We want to do bigger events that attract more people to ride our streets and have fun with their families and to explore our beautiful city by bicycle. And one of those things, we're looking at ciclovias or open streets to basically bring the parks to the people where people can't potentially access some of our park system. We make our streets into parks and healthy streets where people can recreate with their families. We want to build physically separated infrastructure that's easy to navigate and feels safe for people of all ages, from 8 years old to 80 years old. So those are really like the core things that we're focused on here.
Yeah. Philadelphia's chief advantages to start with is its dense grid of streets, its narrow streets, which forces motor vehicles to travel slowly. It makes it easier to share the road with bicyclists, and high density of trips, so that there are a lot of trips that can be easily made by bicycle. We've implemented a similar type of road diet where we've taken two-lane, one-way streets. We have reduced them to one lane of traffic and with a buffer stripe and then a bike lane. And we're getting the same reduction in crashes and serving the same volume of motor vehicle traffic.
Sadikhan. I am the Transportation Commissioner for New York City, and I welcome you to the greatest cycling city in the world. We have now built 350 miles of on-street bike lanes in the last 5 years alone. And now we have a bike share system that has over 50,000 members. So New Yorkers get biking, they love cycling, they're voting with their pedals, and we're so glad to have all of you here checking out the new lanes and checking out the beauty that is the city of New York.
We just cycled from Portland, Oregon.
Oh,
But actually, we're not.
What's good for Ford is good for this nation. Apparently, that's been the ethos for decades now. But everyone can see that doesn't work. You know, the car it provides great mobility in the countryside, but it doesn't provide access in the city. And it creates traffic jams and pollution and noise, obesity and a lack of interaction and blocked streets. Everyone knows this just doesn't work. This city was built for walking and horses, and then they re-engineered it for these contraptions to come flying through here at deadly speed. You know, it's just a ridiculous combination.
People and cars don't mix. And it's really very fundamental to the nature of what it is a car. A car is a multi-ton chunk of steel that can move at high speed. And that by its very nature makes it a deadly object. And we have chosen to insert deadly objects into our own living environment. And it's really, in many ways, as simple and straightforward as that. It's a pathological thing that we've done as a society, that we've made our own living environment toxic to people.
We see pounds shed and heart attacks avoided and marriages or not. You know, when we're doing our messaging too, it's about the economic development strategy associated with this, you know, DOT program. It is an economic development strategy. It's going to keep this city strong. I think it's really important that cities share. I really do. I think sharing notes, what works and what doesn't, is critical. And you know, you do see this healthy competition between New York and London. I think it's a great thing. I think it's a great thing. You know, we're winning, obviously, but you know, it's great.
While Jeanette was right in that New York has no parallel, right? We're all special here in New York. I mean, if you look at global world-class cities, London probably has the most in common with New York in terms of population and density, and you know, the economy, the kind of economy that it has, kind of competition for investment and talent. So, city to make. And you know, Jeanette in her way has been very savvy about, you know, touting the really minimal incremental cost of adding cycling infrastructure, cycling components to existing road resurfacing or other transportation projects on the street. But I think now we're coming to the point where, you know, we really do need to make some more serious investments in making some of the connections. We still have bike lanes that go nowhere. You know? You know, we're using a palette of materials that are not particularly expensive and not particularly sort of complex to get into the street. Not a lot of, you know, new curbs and reconstruction of streets. We're using, you know, signs and markings and limited construction to be able to execute projects quickly. We're talking, you know, hundreds of miles of bike lanes, you know, for single-digit million of dollars, when, you know, we'll just rehab some of the ramps on the Brooklyn Bridge and get close to $500 million. So the scale of what we have to do, you know, what we have to spend to fill potholes versus what we've had to spend to expand the bicycle infrastructure is really, at the end of the day, you know, pennies. The evolution of this organization is very much, you know, radical throwing bricks to having a seat at the table or walking, and that's really like the most amazing thing, that people look at Broadway now and Times Square. Even those who predicted complete traffic mayhem if we made that, you know, more hospitable to pedestrians, are now like, it couldn't be any other way. I mean, it's hard to imagine a time when people were literally spilling into the roadbed and you could not walk down the street because pedestrians outnumbered cars 20 to 1. And now we have, you know, a fairer apportionment that, you know, is a fairer reflection of who's actually using that street. And I think people have already take it for granted.
But the socks,
Slightly Edwardian, you know.
designed by Paul Smith, especially for the ride.
Yeah, exactly. There are only 40 of those ever made.
I can see why.
Right, should we turn around and go back?
Great effort, I think. Really good. I get feeling quite emotional about it. Just that, it's not just cycling across America, which is okay. It's pretty impressive to do 4,500 miles, but to get 150 people cycling up the Mall with outriders and people cheering outside the Portland Place and raising money and doing all this stuff is just. I'm going to ask a question.
Anytime, look at me, everyone look at me. Very good, give us a wave in the back. Punch
National Route who signed it for us, mayors, heads of Department of Transport. You know, we got to London.
Stunning at many levels, challenging at many other levels, and a relief to be at the end of it in one piece and having achieved it. But I will take the memory of it, the experience of it away from this forever.
It was highs and lows. It was a real challenge. First couple of weeks was a real challenge, but then when you got used to it, when your body gets used to it, it became really pleasurable. Riding with some great people, some fantastic friends for life.
I found generally the physical stuff was manageable. I think if you go on a trip like this, you know there are going to be tough days, and if you zone in and work as a team, you can pull through it. But I think the psychological aspect of spending so many hours with the same people was really hard work. And also,
That was hard work, was it?
hard work at times. The days when you need a bit of space and you can't get any, and the days when you're tired and people are irritating you, and sometimes a bit of lack of female company is, you know, a bit of a challenge.
No, drivers are not polite here. They're much more aggressive here. In the US, they give you a wide berth. They're respectful of the fact. Maybe that was because we were a very curious thing. Yeah, could have been a group. It may have been different if you were an individual. But the amount of incidents we had in 7-8 weeks of cycling, I'll experience twice that amount riding from Hackney to the city on a dozen places.
There's a real zeitgeist about cycling in America, that, you know, as much as there is in Europe and in England and in London. But one of the things that struck me was the facilities for cycling in all the places we went to surpassed what we've got around here in London. It's actually, you know, rather tragic. There's so many people who would cycle in London if only they felt more safe. And I hope that what we did in the P2P ride can now feed into Boris Johnson's spending plans for cycling, and we can really get cycling up the agenda, you know, for everybody using, you know, moving around London.
And we'd like to thank particularly our sponsors who have made this all possible. AHMM, Arthur Gallagher International, Derwent London, Capco, DHL Express, whose van is going to take us across America and all our luggage, Grimshaw, HOK, Gestico and Wiles. Cheer! KPF, NLA, Paul Smith for the socks. Whoa. Pipers, Pringle, Brandon, Perkins and Will, Rafa outside there. And particularly Chris DiStefano has really looked after us so well while we've been here in Portland, and Wilkinson Air.
And Ing Media.
And
Media.
Yeah, no, I'm getting to Ing Media. And Ing Media, who have helped to organise, keep us all in order, plan things, and really make sure we've got here at the start in really good time.